Perfectly done, Shane.
I wondered, have you all done your homework this week by listening to the Rugby Union Daily? Tumbleweed. Listen to that. Tumbleweed.
Of course.
Goodness me.
Yeah.
Listen to it twice.
No, I mean, it doesn't even download. It automatically plays on my phone now.
As soon as you get in the car.
That's the on messaging that I was looking for. So I know that you've all heard Danny Kerr and Sam Warburton chatting away in their current podcast about the great stadiums that we have in the Six Nations and which one could well be the greatest. And I was part of that conversation. If you haven't heard it, you can get it on BBC Sounds. They discussed the most famous people, actually, that they'd had in their dressing room, particularly around England-Wales, because that obviously draws the celebrities. And you probably won't come as a surprise, because we've seen the photos on social media, that Danny said he had a photograph with Daniel Craig, so James Bond's been in there, Sam Warburton was been rubbing shoulders with Prince William, obviously the patron of the WRU. So come on, you're the most famous celebrities you've encountered on one of these huge match days that you've kind of gone, I want to get a selfie with that one.
I've got two good ones, I think, and bizarrely it was Scotland England where they come out of the woodwork for the Calcutta Cup. The first one was J.K. Rowling, which is quite cool. Kids read the books, maybe not as exciting as James Bond, but Gerard Butler came in after Scotland England, which would have been great, but we'd be beaten by 50 points, so no one asked for selfies.
I would have been quite excited to see Gerard Butler, to be fair, but there we go, I digress.
Prince William, I knew him before Sam Warburton, and he stole him off me. Yeah. And now they're BFFs. Joe Kazagi, he used to come into the change room as well. He's pretty decent fighter. I think it's 46 and nil, 46 knockouts, wins, 0 losses. Proper legend. You've got to have the traditional boxing picture with him though, like with your arm around him and your fist held up like that, like at his jaw. Oh, I'll get you.
Oh, I love that.
But that's it for me.
Matt, you must have rubbed shoulders with a few celebs in your time in the dressing room. Were they allowed in your day? Would Clive Woodward let them in?
Yeah, no, well, Clive wouldn't have anything of it, but I suppose the royal side of things, when I was England captain at whenever that had been, 2000, something like that, and Prince William was just a mere slip of a lad, and wanted to have a tour of the changing room. So I took him down and showed him around the whole sort of inner sanctum of the England dressing room, and gave him my number 9 shirt of the day. Very, very proud about that, until the next game when Johnny Wilkinson played, and he did it with him rather than me. And that was so it lasted a game. But the other one was Richard Harris, the actor Richard Harris from Gladiator, and after an Ireland game he came in to the England dressing room, and honestly, there was utter silence and awe as this magnificent man it wasn't a speech, but what he was saying to us about the game and his thoughts of the game were as if he was in the opening speech of Gladiator, and we all just sort of eyes wide open, and that was amazing. That was really, really cool.
Well, the star of one of the best sports films ever, This Sporting Life, all about rugby. Amazing man, Richard Harris. Yeah. We had a couple of good ones. We were lucky enough because it's Ireland. We've got U2 in our backyard, and Larry Mullen Jr., the drummer, was a rugby fan. So he used to come to lots of the games, and he's super cool. Really privileged to have him around. And then the other one, proper Hollywood, I think, Colin Farrell. At the sort of a height of his fame, so he came in too handsome to be in a rugby changing room, certainly, but we were privileged to have him in at a couple of times actually. He was a regular.
Colin Farrell at the height of his fame. Are you writing him off?
Yeah, he's done.
He's done.
Well, it continues.
Has anyone heard the story with Ollie Phillips? I'm not trying to tell his story, but it makes ours pale into comparison when you're at Stade Francais in their heyday, and Madonna ends up getting in the hot bath afterwards, the big giant hot baths.
You're kidding me.
In her underpants, yeah. There's a story there. It's a true story. He's told it before on a podcast. So.
Can you embellish a little bit for us?
Do we need to?
I thought that was enough, Sonia, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
I'll add some filler if you want.
Why? It was like, of all the people and
that was in
world.
their peak of their pomp, I guess, at Stade Francais, and the very celebrity based. And I guess Madonna would have been in Paris at some stage and fill in the blanks.
Imagine the call saying, "Right, camera phones off, lads. We've got a special guest coming in."
I wonder if was that in her conical bra days. I don't know. Who knows? I've now got an image in my. We do digress greatly, but I now have this fabulous image in my head. Anyway, thank you for that, John Barclay. That's a nice little interlude there. Right, let's talk about rugby, shall we? I know that was a lot of fun. Let's start with England Wales and the breaking news this evening, because everybody got very excited. Certainly on my timeline from the England fans, that we were finally going to see for England this Smith Tuolangi Slade kind of combination. But this evening we've discovered that Manu Tuolangi is out. He had a scan after training today. He's got a hamstring injury, although it's described as a low grade one. Joe Marchant, he's been recalled. He was actually due to play for Harlequins against Worcester tomorrow night, but he's not. He's now back with England, and England won't though name their team until match day, till Saturday, as they work out what they're going to do now in their midfield. So let's Manu Tuolangi, goodness me, so fragile. I think the reaction when I saw it was, oh my goodness, not again. Was that kind of your reaction when you heard it, chaps? Shane?
Yeah, disappointment for him, but also it's funny how things have developed over the last couple of weeks. All of a sudden it seems like everything that England are trying to do is based around the player who's just come into the team and hadn't been there for the last number of weeks, and it did feel as if Eddie is putting a lot of pressure on him and sort of building the team around him, talking about him as a unique player. Of course he is, but if you look back to the first week in particular, where we saw Slade and Daly in the centre together against Scotland, and we were seeing them take the ball up in in those type of role that you would see Tuolangi providing, thinking this is borderline ridiculous. So that's not their that's not their role, that's not what they're best at, but it is what he is. And I think maybe Eddie had one eye on him coming back and sort of building a strategy around it, and that's gone out the window. And I think as a result of that, England, who I thought looked sort of marginal favourites, you have to question it, because you would imagine there's a huge amount of change that has to go on in the next 48 hours to allow them to adapt to the loss of such a core player.
Hold that thought. Rangers Borussia Dortmund, what do you say?
Rangers have gone one ahead and 5-2 on aggregate, and it was a penalty kick by James Tavernier, just as he did in the first leg. This time it was Ryan Kent, brought down by Brandt, right on the whitewash in the penalty area, but the referee was a yard away and gave the kick. Rangers a goal to the good.
And Arsenal against Wolves in the Premier League. Sahel Sahi.
Yeah, Wolves still leading Sonia by a goal to nil. 6 minutes to play in this first half. Arsenal fighting back, but Wolves at the moment defending very well, and they lead Arsenal by a goal to nil.
Tom Shanklin, I know you were clearly a finely tuned athlete in your day and plied your trade in. I did have tongue in cheek, but apologies for that. I plied your trade, of course, in midfield for Wales. Your thoughts on what's befallen Manu Tuolangi, and one has to say again.
The 9, 10, 12, 13 of Wales will be very, very happy with that, because he's such a powerful player. He's such a big ball carrier. He's so explosive. That it's crazy. Like Shane says, England were building their game plan around him, and now he's off. I was sure they were going to go for a 6-2 split as well on the bench, and I think they might have gone with a 5-3 because of Manu Tuolangi and maybe how much of the game he was going to play. Maybe that will change, because I think England will massively try and take Wales on up front. But I think it's a good plus for Wales, because I rate Manu so highly. He's such a great individual athlete. He's been performing well since he's got back from fitness, and the guy can do everything. You know, he can take to the line. He can destroy people in tackles. You know, he can carry so well. He's fast. He's got really good footwork. So it's a massive plus for Wales. As much as it's, you know, you all feel sorry for him because he's a professional athlete. We all played rugby. You'd want to see injured players, especially what he's been through. It's good news in a way for Wales that England are losing such a dynamic ball carrier.
Matt?
Yeah, you have to apologies. I just dropped out there. So the question was basically around Manu.
Yeah.
Yeah. We got there pretty quickly. I spoke to BBC Wales this morning, and they were asking, you know, what of course, what a great threat, as Shanks has just mentioned there, that Manu is, and of course you have to reply and agree with all of those characteristics of Manu Tuilagi, unique within the English game, and you know we do want him fast tracked back into the side, but we have to be mindful that, you know, his body is taking an absolute pounding with his injuries, his recovery, rehabilitation. You know, we've all been there, fellas. We know how tough some of those big injuries are to come back from, and he has had multiple, as well as on top of all of that, the energy and power that he puts through his body, whether he's training or whether he's playing, is significantly more than, dare I say, the 4 ex-pros that are on this call.
Not Shanks.
And unfortunately, I think this is a classic example of, you know, are we going to see Manu regularly back? I think we're going to see him back playing for England, but are we going to see him play over a consistent period of time? Because it looks to me like, unfortunately, he's getting to that part of his career where his body is creaking at regular intervals, and it's going to make it really, really difficult for him to get any kind of consistency.
Can I just ask?
Is that still enough for England? I don't know.
Can I ask, once that starts to happen? I mean, I saw a stat today that he's missed 79 tests since his debut against Wales, ironically, in a World Cup warm-up match in 2011, and now you can add 8. That's now 80. Think how many caps he'd have if he'd actually been even just vaguely fitter. So he's clearly.
It's not so much the caps on you; it's how good England could be.
Yeah.
Yeah, he would. I mean, even he had half of them. The momentum that gives you when you've got someone. I mean, how many conversations have we had over the years about England's midfield and combinations that have been right, have been wrong, have been indifferent, and where's Manu, etc., etc. England would be a very, very different side if they'd had that consistency.
And it's hard to turn the page when you know you've got a player as good as him potentially coming back. You know, you can't build something else. If any sort of coach worth their salt would go, if this guy is fit, if he gets back and he's still only young, then we got to have him in the team, and we actually probably have to develop a core part of our game plan around him. So while he's still there, while there's still the potential for him to come back, it's almost impossible for coaches to turn the page on him, and I understand why they don't, and I don't think they should either. But they should also make sure, wherever possible, that when he's coming back from an injury, that you're not picking up a soft tissue on the week of an international in the Six Nations. That shouldn't be happening.
Yeah, I just think that it looks like the England game plan, in particular in that first game against Scotland, almost as if Eddie Jones had an eye on Manu coming back and created that shape to play with in that game with a view to, this is the shape we're going to have. We know Manu might be back for Italy. He could have played. He was cutting boys in half, playing for Sale against Harlequins that week. I just think, for me, like everyone said it, but this for England is a, you know, almost rip up the playbook for the weekend. Tactically, this completely turns it on its head. The players they have, they don't have a player, and everyone says is unique. They don't have a player in that, with that skill set, with that athletic ability. So, changing game plan.
Where do you draw the line, John? When do the coaches draw a line to say, do you know, we've got to move on from Manu? If he's fit, of course, then we're going to look at him, but we've got to move on.
I agree, but then I never coached, but then, you know, he's played 2 games for Sale and been superb. So I agree. I think maybe given his track record, do you say we'll give it a couple of weeks? Do we just let him get a run in games? And because that's the thing people don't fully get. I don't think and all the guys know here, the intensity of training at international level is a huge step up. The speed of it, certainly when I was with Greg, the intensity of it, everything goes up. And maybe he wasn't quite ready for that intensity of training. He was playing in games. Maybe he was being managed a bit better. We don't know the inside track, but I just hear that. I think the mental toll for him to keep coming back from is just huge. I had one big injury in my career, and it was a year, and he's arguably done that, I don't know, 5 times now. It's just, you just don't know how he keeps coming back, and almost credit to him for having that mental resilience to keep coming back. But Jesus, England need to come up with a plan B for the considerable future, you'd think, based on this news.
And just as a final point, because Shane's alluded to it, Shane says you shouldn't be getting a soft tissue injury in a week of a Six Nations match. It shouldn't happen. It obviously does happen. I mean, how do you avoid something like that? Can you avoid something like that?
Sometimes you can't. Sometimes you just can't, because you obviously have to sprint, and you obviously have to do fitness, and you have to put your body under duress for some of those days, mostly in the early part of the week. And sometimes your body just lets you down. I mean, I suppose the good thing for Manu is that by what we're hearing, it is soft tissue. And that's not a long period out. It's not like his knee's gone again or his shoulder's gone again. It is soft tissue, and that will heal. But these things do happen, and sometimes when you're coming back from injury and big injuries, other muscles and other injuries occur because your body's not used to it. So,
it is fascinating. It's fascinating that England have recalled Joe Marchant, but are not just putting him straight in the team. They now say they're going to name their team on Saturday. And that comes back to Matt's point, doesn't it, Matt? That it has now thrown England's game plan up in the air. They've got to start again, haven't they?
No, I mean, I think you've got to bear in mind that Marchant and Slade have had a couple of games together, and in theory, the Marchant should be able to slot in. Should be able to slot into that. I can't see there being, I don't see how 10 days of training with Manu completely shifts the way that England are going to learn how to play the game at the weekend. I mean, it's going to make a little bit of difference because you've got a day and a half. But I mean, I'd be disappointed if England were in a position in their cycle and training that by Manu dropping out has completely sent it into disarray. I would be disappointed with that.
I'd say that Smith and Randall and Slade would be disappointed. As to have that player who you can, not necessarily that potentially tactically launch plays, but also having a player of that ability to drop the ball off when you're under pressure, someone who gives you targets. And I think that's potentially what England have missed in the first 2 games, is someone who gives them real good targets, real good go forward ball.
Yeah, and that is quite a fundamental change based around one player. He is an incredible target man. He's not, by the way, just a target man. Yeah. He's so much more than that. He leads the line really aggressively in defence. A brilliant offloader. Good footwork. There's a lot to his game. But when you think structurally, from a overall sort of macro game plan, a lot of what England could be operating off is throwing him up off first phase ball, and then a kind of a power play whereby you already know what you're doing off your second and third phase, because you're so certain to get over the game line, whether it be from scrum or line out, using him in the first phase. So it can have quite a fundamental change to what they're going to be doing.
So back to that, to an original point then. Why are England, for the last, since the autumn or whatever, have they seriously just been going through the motions and training and going through patterns just so Manu can slot in? Because that has not, by definition of missing 80 games, has not created a huge amount of fruit from the tree. And England have to move on at some stage. It might be in 2 years, it might be in 2 months, but they're going to have to move on. And I just find it really, really. I mean, as an example, Richard Hill was our version of Manu Tuilagi. That we were fundamentally a different side when we had Richard Hill on the flank to when we didn't. And I know we had Jason Robinson and Martin Johnson and like Delalio and Johnny Wilkinson, all these brilliant players. Richard Hill was the guy who would travel to the World Cup, didn't play to the semi-final because it didn't matter. We just needed him fit. But it didn't mean that we were just playing in one way for Richard Hill to fit in. In a way, Richard Hill would fit in with how England played because he was that good. I feel it's really unhealthy to just have an England side that are waiting in the wings for this period of time, playing in a style that might not be right for them, but it's right for Manu. It doesn't fit with me.
We could talk about this until 9 o'clock, frankly, but we've got half-time at Arsenal-Wolves, Sahel Sahi.
Yeah, Wolves leading at half-time by 1-0. Hwang pouncing on a short back pass by Gabriel. He danced past the stranded Aaron Ramsdale and coolly converted. It should have been 2. Raúl Jimenez dragging his shot wide from the edge of the area. Arsenal hit back with chances for Lacazette twice and Odegaard, but a combination of good defending and goalkeeping keeping them at bay. Half-time, Arsenal 0, Wolves 1.
And Rangers against Borussia Dortmund, Roddy Forsyth.
Last time you were with me, I was telling you that James Tavernier had scored with a penalty kick just as he did in the first leg. Well, it's another repeat this time for Borussia Dortmund with a pass from Daniel Malin being made a hash of by Connor Goldson. He drove it against Jude Bellingham, and the English teenager showed good composure to stick his shot past Alan McGregor. So it's now 1 each on the night, and it's 5-3 in aggregate, and we're 9 minutes away from half-time.
Thanks, Roddy. We'll be back to Roddy throughout the rest of the programme. We're here till 9. Let's have a look at part of the team then that England have selected. And one name that jumped out, Matt Dawson, in your old jersey, is Harry Randall. And I think there were a few people who were hoping he was going to play but weren't expecting him to play. Thought that Eddie Jones might go back to Ben Youngs. What your thoughts when you saw that he'd gone for the young Tyro there?
I think I would have been, I was one of those people who sort of expected Ben to play because of where Eddie has been, but there was a part of me hoping that he would go with Harry Randall, without sort of going over the old ground of the style of England play. There is a different dynamic to the way that England are playing at the moment. It's a bit rough around the edges, but Harry is a threat. I think if you're the opposition, you're going to have to defend England in a very different way than if Ben Youngs was playing. Now, all those obvious things that everybody sees about the scrum half, the passing, their kicking, their support lines, etc., are good. Some of them maybe not as good as Ben Youngs. Some of them better. But what has to happen at the weekend? He's got to manage the game. And this is not Italy away from home. This is Wales at home, where they're going to be all over him, verbally, physically. Can he manage the game, Shanks, under all that pressure?
Well, that's one area I guarantee Wales will target. If they can get good set piece or parity at set piece, that 9-10 channel with the likes of Cuthbert, with the likes of Josh Adams, they'll be going straight down that channel, because even though he's a decent defender, he's not a big bloke, and he's going to get players down, but he's not going to make aggressive tackles. And if you can separate him and isolate him and also Marcus Smith, then that's going to be some really good go forward for Wales. But it starts at set piece, and I look at that England pack, and mate, it's impressive. Like, as a Welshman,
that's where if you're Harry Randall, you're in the biggest you're in a proper lazy boy chair, never mind the armchair. You've got your drink in the holder, box of pizza, and away we go. This is fun times. And if England do get any kind of dominance up front, and again I'll go back to the management of the forwards, which comes from the 9. If he gets that bit right, he's set to light it up for sure.
I'll tell you a player coming back as well, Faletau, coming in at 8. Played a game and a half for Bath, and he's so important to Wales. He's such a talisman. We lack carriers at the moment. We lack players that are really good at reading the game. The footwork he's got before contact is incredible. He's a massive boost, and at the moment, we've seen, and it's been documented about the amount of players that Wales are missing, the amount of caps and the amount of leaders. He might not be the most vocal leader, but mate, the guy leads by example, and some of the unselfish stuff he does as well. Like, sometimes when he's not involved, he might just be in that 5 metre channel, keeping the width, and that's because he reads the game well, and he knows there's going to be space out there. And when you do unselfish things like that, it stretches defences because they're worried about players on the touchline, and it creates holes elsewhere. So it's a massive plus. The back row for Wales looks really, really tasty. Probably the strength of the team going into Saturday.
John Barclay is a back row man. Do you think the Wales back row looks tasty?
I do. I think Basham's been, I wouldn't say revelation because he was superb in the autumn, but Doss said there about Richard Hill's involvement with England, that player that was so important. I would put Faletau in that bracket for Wales. And I think Wayne Pivac come back and said, or maybe it was his club coach, he just doesn't really have bad games. His games where you maybe don't notice him as much as you do, but his good games are world class, and the games below that are he does all the unselfish work, he gets through his work, he carries. I think just the way he carries, he's not enormous, but his footwork, like Shanks says, he beats the defender, and then his power through contact. I think Wales against Scotland were very physical. They're very direct. They won the physical battle. They won the battle on the floor, but they still probably lacked that ability to get through contact, to offload, to use a bit more subtlety, to use a bit of foot. And I think he is a player that will add that to that team.
And so in other team news, they've gone for Owen Watkin and Nick Thompson's in midfield, and Jonathan Davis is on the replacements bench. Lewis Rees-Zammit not playing is one of the big, call it a shock if you like, I don't know, I don't think. But Shane Williams is someone who... Shane
Williams. we couldn't get on this week.
Oh, that was a low blow, Shane.
I'm only on for 1 week, it's fine.
No matter how honest it is, you can't say it.
Mr. Horgan, that's what I meant. Yeah. As a former winger yourself, what do you make of the fact that he is being, touted as the big star? He was the breakthrough act of the last Six Nations Championship, and here he is, sort of left out in the cold at this stage of his career.
Yeah, it does seem a little harsh because he is the rock star for me. He's about as far away from a winger as I was as possible to be. He is pure pace, and I loved playing with another winger who was all about pure pace. And I was lucky enough I played with Dennis Hickey on the other wing, who was super fast, and you knew you always had a get out of jail card on the team, no matter where you were on the field, what time the game was. If you had a player that can finish the length of the field, then you have a comfort in that, and it's a reason to stay in the game. And surprisingly for Wales, you see, last year in particular, a lot of the games they stayed in the game, then got an opportunity, and it was often a Rees-Zammit break that was the difference between them winning and potentially losing. So I'm surprised they discarded him. Yeah, he did look a little soft in defence over the last couple of weeks, and it is a massive area of the game, but he's the type of player that will not only do what I spoke about there, but he's the kind of player that you're basing long-term your sort of long-term strategy on. He's the horse that you want to bet. So he's not the finished product. He's only a young guy. He has so much going for him. I would have retained him for the long term. I don't think it would have damaged the Wales opportunity this week badly.
I hope the scores rattle up as fast in the Six Nations this weekend as they appear to be for Roddy Forsyth, Rangers Borussia Dortmund.
Yes, indeed, and this time Borussia Dortmund have taken the lead on the night. Daniel Malen took advantage of pinball inside the Rangers box, and Jude Bellingham, the young Englishman who had scored earlier for Dortmund, flicked one towards the striker. He stuck out a leg into the net. It goes just before half-time. Rangers won, Borussia Dortmund 2, and it's 5-4 now on aggregate for Rangers.
Does it feel a bit nervy now there?
It does, I must say, Sonia. Rangers have looked good going forward. Both defences have looked awkward when under pressure, but remember that Borussia felt that if they could get within a goal of Rangers, they could take this tie, and that's how it stands now. They're attacking again at the moment. Another shot into the side net, so it's still 1-2 on the night. A minute to go to half-time, 5-4 in aggregate.
Goodness me, 9 goals so far in that time. You get the feeling there's going to be more. Just a thought, Tom Shanklin, on Lewis Rees-Zammit. Do you think it's the right thing at this stage to send him back to Gloucester, or do you think, like Shane, he should have been retained with Wales?
I think it helped with his motivation, but he's young. I think he's been waiting for the game to come to him a lot, and you haven't really seen many involvements. He hasn't been searching for the ball, and sometimes you've got to do that. Wales' attack hasn't helped him at all because, as John mentioned earlier, they're playing really direct. They didn't play any rugby really against Ireland, and when they played against Scotland, Dan Biggar and Thomas Williams hit the forwards constantly. They carried all the time, and when it was on, it wasn't given. And when he's getting the ball, he's getting it in no space whatsoever. But he's the type of player that one loose kick, one half chance, he could just open up defences. You saw it, I think it was against Newcastle before the Six Nations started. He has the ability just to get people on the front foot, to get your team on the front foot, to score a try out of nothing. He's got absolutely raw pace. So, yeah, I would have played him. But at the moment, the way Wales attack, it doesn't really matter who you have on the wing because they're not getting the ball there in the right situation. They played against Scotland, and a lot of emotion got them that win. It was backs against the wall. There was so much pressure on that Welsh team to perform, and that got them through. That's not going to happen every week. You can't get that emotionally high every single week. At some stage, you're going to have to start playing a little bit wider, and that's when you need a player like Lewis Rees-Zammit because, on form, he's wonderful to watch.
Yeah. Eddie Jones suggesting today in his news conference that Rees-Zammit isn't fit. He said if he was a racehorse, you wouldn't be running him this weekend. One call to Gloucester, and the chap I spoke to looked out of his window and said he's running around outside training. So that kind of
yeah.
There you go. Every likelihood he'll be in the 23 for Gloucester against Leicester this weekend. Now let's talk about. So England against Wales, should remind you, is on 5 Live at 5:45 kickoff on Saturday. Don't miss that one 4:45 I should say. Before that, Scotland against France. That kicks off round 3 at Murrayfield. Gosh, you can just imagine the atmosphere in Edinburgh this weekend. That's going to be on Sports Extra from 2 o'clock. So I have to start with you, John Barclay. What went wrong against Wales?
An entire second half, I'd say.
Right.
Okay. I think I've watched the game back a couple of times, and it doesn't get better, which is no surprise given the reports that come out. But I think Scotland were in the game, and I watched the game behind the sticks, could see the shape that Scotland had, and Wales looked quite disorganised to start with. But as the game went on, Wales got better and better, and they came with a really smart game plan, a very simple game plan, which is not meant with any distract. They played to their strengths. They played direct rugby. They were superbly physical. They relied a lot on an emotional reaction, like Shank said. But Scotland, you watch it back, Scotland's instinct every single time they got the ball was to kick. Every single time. They looked up. They didn't look side. Just where can we? In fact, it got to the point it didn't matter where the kick went. And Wales are quite smart. Scotland kept kicking long, and Wales kicked back, but they brought the ball back and made it contestable. And when you got someone like Liam Williams in the air, he got 3 or 4 back in the air, and that's where the game was won and lost. And then it was just a lot of ill discipline by Scotland on the ground. But when you're playing,
was that a deliberate tactic, John? Because it seems to me that goes against every instinct.
Well, exactly.
Against every instinct that it is for Scotland when they just want to play heads-up rugby.
I was superbly frustrated watching it because it looked like the body language was that they had all the time in the world, and the clock. You turn around and there's 5 minutes left or 10, whatever it was, and then Finn got sin-binned after with 12 minutes to play, and it looked like kicks going out in the full and people were trying chips, and Darcy Gray into the kick, Hoggy had one out in the full, and you're like, this game, you got a sense in the stadium that the game was running away from them, and it didn't take long in that second half for that feeling to start to sweep over the stadium. So yeah, it totally. I saw Gregor on the Monday, and you could just sense the frustration and the, I guess, a sense of missed opportunity. So yeah, it was really disappointing. Really disappointing for them to not get away with a win there. But I think Wales played really smart rugby. They played really physically. Didn't overcomplicate things, and they didn't need to.
I thought it was an out and out classic Six Nations game, and not necessarily a particularly pretty game, but the subplots behind it all, the everyone writing Wales off. Imagine them. Listen, we've all been there. You've been written off. You go, but you got a chance the next week to rectify that at home. you are not giving that up lightly. And I think, in my perception of that game, and particularly when, as you mentioned there, John, the Scots felt that they had more time. There was only 5 minutes to go. I sort of felt that when they had the ball in their hands, they felt like they were playing as if they had more time as well. And that extra millisecond of speed that you get off the line because you're a Welsh team that got dusted up by Ireland, and you are desperate to win this game in the second half, and you're under, because Scotland, I wouldn't say had a hand on the game, but in the first half they looked like, oh, okay, we're into the flow of the game here and we could have control of it. But then Wales in the second half just upped the intensity, and Scotland, I sort of felt that frustration and disappointment for Scotland, but particularly for the coaching staff, because you could sort of see it unravelling, and you wanted to shake some of the Scotland players and say, please change this up, you've got 20 minutes to go, come up with something different, because they're going to be motivated this weekend against France, and it wouldn't surprise me if they turn them over.
That's the kind of interesting point. I thought, and John, I'd be interested in your thoughts on this, I thought Scotland, this version of Scotland, had got over this type of result or that type of result against Wales. I thought they'd just broken the back of it, and been there a few times over the last few years saying they've had the big win that wasn't expected, and then they failed to deliver when there was expectation. We spoke about it a couple of weeks ago. I really thought this was the opportunity to sort of break that hoodoo. Now I think Wales showed exactly what the Six Nations is about at home, and the passion and delivery when things aren't going right, but digging in and making sure you get the result. But at the same time, the opportunity was there for Scotland and they didn't take it, and that hasn't allowed them to move on to sort of psychologically to the next phase of where they want to get to.
Yeah, I think you're right. It totally changes the narrative. We thought they were, I think probably outsiders looking in thought this was that next evolution for this team to go to win the sort of back-to-back and to then go to France and Italy. But I guess one of the unsettling things is that some comments came out and people saying, oh, who does Scotland think they are? The arrogance was a bit. I don't think the Scottish players have any arrogance having played with the group. But if you're asked if you're going to win at the weekend before a game, you're never going to say no. So I defy anyone that states otherwise. And I think Scotland deserves to go down with, chest puffed out a little bit, with confidence. But now I would say it's back to the drawing board, much like when Manu's not playing for England. It's not back to the drawing board for Scotland, but there'll be an emotional reaction, which is what we saw from Wales the weekend. And I think that's what you're maybe talking about, Shane, is that maybe you thought we were over those emotional fluctuations in their performance.
We are running out of time, alas. France, then, going up to Murrayfield, 2 from 2, the only side that can win the Grand Slam. They've just made one change to their team as well, so they're going with pretty much the same 23, who were tremendous against Ireland. Many saying that France are the best team in the world right now. Is that true, Matt? Pull a face.
I would. No, I'm not. No, I was sort of on our Zoom call here. I was looking at other faces to see whether they were going to eyes wide open, a shake, nod, whatever they were going to say. But there isn't hesitation from me. If you're saying the best team in the world, I've got to pick one. I'm going to say France. I think not only are we know that their player base has always been strong. We know that they have that ability, that flair to create one-off victories or Grand Slam championships now and again, but where's the consistency? I just think there is an edge in that squad and management that France I haven't seen in my professional career, and I think it stems from the way that they are spoken to and coached every single day of their rugby lives. They have good times, you see them enjoying themselves and doing all the things that you expect the French players to do, but then you see them absolutely zoned in, tuned in, disciplined, performing at the very highest level when they need to.
They've not given away an offside penalty, I think, so far in the Six Nations, which is huge. That shows you like the Sean Edwards effect and the culture that he's brought. They've gone with size massively. Like Jonathan Dante's back in. Gael Fiku is just a massive unit. Moafana as well. So they've got so many good players to pick from. So much size, so much physicality, and now they're not a lazy team anymore. You know, the culture that's been brought in is such a massive work ethic. They're disciplined. They've got a style of play that suits. They've got amazing halfbacks. There aren't many weaknesses to them.
No, there aren't. Scotland against France is a 2:15 kickoff. It's on BBC television. It's also right here on Sports Extra as well. Ireland against Italy brings the curtain down on round 3. That's a 3 o'clock kickoff on Sunday. Again, that's on Sports Extra. So interesting here in terms of selection. Their team will be named tomorrow. Shane, what does Andy Farrell do? Does he stick or twist, do you think, because it's Italy?
I think he's going to stick, you know, and there's a sort of there is a sort of body of opinion in Ireland saying, well, listen, we've got to get all the new players out, build our squad for the World Cup. Joey Carberry needs more time at 10, but I think he's going to stick, and I have a feeling that right now Johnny Sexton is in his ear saying, listen, I missed out the last game. It's going to be another 2 weeks to the next game. We've got to win this Six Nations, and he will want to play. He is, you know, relentless in his competitiveness. He doesn't want to give Joey an opportunity. But more than that, I think Ireland feel as if they're building their game. He's so intrinsic to their game plan, and we saw that against France, and that maybe was the difference between the two sides. So I think he's going to stick. There may be a couple of tweaks around the edges. You know, Henshaw could come back, get some game time. Henderson could come into the second row. You know, that's not going to change things. The key for Ireland is the philosophy that was changed in the autumn, that was brought through into the Wales game, that it couldn't quite manifest against France because of the sheer physicality that Shanks was talking about with the French side. It's an opportunity to get things back on track and set themselves up for the last 2 weekends.
Exactly. Now, before we end the show, chaps, we need to mention the very, very sad news today that at the age of 52 only, rugby legend Vainga Tuigamala, Inga the Winger, has passed away, which is just terribly, terribly sad. Played league and union, of course, for Newcastle Falcons, Wigan, New Zealand, Samoa. He was almost, saw someone write today, which was very apt, he was almost Jonah Lomu before Jonah Lomu. I think most of you, if not all of you, have played against him. Matt, you did, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, played against him quite a lot, whether it be sort of Wasps, Newcastle, Samoa. I mean, I would, you know, the quote you just gave there about almost Jonah Lomu, he was. I mean, there was no almost about it. Inga the Winger was, I think it was only maybe his height that separated him away from, you know, the sort of the comments that Will Carling said about Jonah Lomu in '95. Oh my God, he's a freak. Whereas, I remember those early days of, you know, late '80s, watching him at Wigan, etc. They're going into the '90s, and he was unstoppable, absolutely unstoppable. But I think what's really important, as well as the rugby piece, though, is that he was a magnificent person off the field. You talk to someone like Jason Robinson, who, you know, effectively Jason will tell you that Inga saved his life. You know, taking Jason under his wing at Wigan and setting him on a path that set him up to be, for Jason to be one of the greatest rugby union league players that ever was. I mean, Inga was an incredibly selfless individual and a great loss.
He was so good. Like, I remember playing against him really young for Saracens. He was at Newcastle, and you just couldn't get anywhere near him because he was so powerful, such a great rugby player, so low to the ground. You know, he just swat you off. The best you could do would be a speed bump and someone else come and take him. But do you know what? I remember him. Do you remember the Middlesex Sevens years ago in Wigan entered the team?
1996, that was.
They absolutely destroyed everybody. The team they had was amazing, and he was massive in that game. Like, he had everything, didn't he? He had pace, he had strength, you know, he could pass, and was super aggressive as well.
He was a phenomenon. You know, I think people mightn't remember, or, you know, new to the game, he was an absolute phenomenon. He burst onto the scene as this insane new type of winger that was almost unstoppable. I remember being blown away by the size of his thighs. He was so powerful. You could barely think to get your arms around him, and he was a hero of mine growing up. As I was going through my teens, he burst on the scene, and I was so excited just watching him. And then I did get to play against him when he was at Newcastle, and I was very early in my career with Leinster, and I was so excited being able to share the same pitch as him. And while the guys have mentioned there, while he was such an incredibly aggressive player when he got the ball, like he looked so angry, he looked violent, but at the same time, after he'd finished bouncing you off, he'd be the guy who'd pick you up and give you a pat and send you on your way. So it's desperately disappointing. He was a charming, beautiful man, and it's far too early to lose him.
That Middlesex Sevens side: Jason Robinson, Chris Wedlinski, Gary Connolly, Martin Afire, Sean Edwards, Henry Paul, Andy Farrell, Scott Quinnell, and the dearly departed Inga Twigamala. That football,
They walked it. Honestly, it was brilliant. I think they played Wasps in the final. Everyone was hoping that Wasps would give them a game, but they were phenomenal. Honestly, it was a brilliant. You just wish you'd see more of that now. It'd be brilliant to see the rugby league boys do something like that.
Very, very sad news, and with our thoughts are with his friends and family, and Jason Robinson too, who tweeted today that he's absolutely heartbroken, and you can understand why. Well, let's just bring it back round to the Six Nations Championship then. Let's have our predictions. Let's start with the opening game of the weekend, Scotland against France. Matt Dawson, you set the ball rolling, and you can bring them all in. Bang bang.
Okay. Well, I will get thinking, John. I'm going to leave you till last. I will go. Maybe I'll throw it out there first of all and say I think France are going to be too strong, and France will win that relatively comfortably. Shane?
I agree. I don't think France are perfect, and they weren't. They were far from perfect against Ireland. But I think they will be too good for Scotland. But saying that, it's just the type of result where Scotland will come out and win. But I think too much on it for France. I think they'll be laser focused.
Shane covering all bases there. Good work, Shanks.
Scotland are where Wales were last week or 2 weeks ago. So you'll see a reaction from them. But France, too big, too powerful.
All right, come on then, JB.
If Scotland win on the weekend, it will be one of their best results in the professional era, I think.
I've got to be honest, when you started that sentence, everybody listening to this thought that you were going to do something. Like you were going to eat your hat or
come on the show naked next week
somewhere, or you were going to do
I
something.
can do that. No, I can't do that. No, I didn't say that.
The second half of that.
I didn't say that. No. I think France.
I think you just did. We've got it on record.
No, we didn't. No one's recording this. It's fine. I think my heart says Scotland, and my head says France, but I'm not going to tell you which one I'm going to rely on. So
right, we haven't got much time left.
Like Shane.
Let's go to Twickenham then. 4:45. England against Wales. Matt.
Okay, slightly change the order here, Shane.
I'll be unequivocal about this one. I think it'll be England.
Okay, John.
England.
Oh. I was going to go for a comfortable England win until Manu isn't in, so I'm just going for an England win. Shanks, come on then. Don't give me the heart and head.
Not John Barkley, mate.
Classic line.
Not John Barkley. The last 4 games in the Guinness Six Nations between Wales and England have been won by the home side, so I'm going to go with an England win.
Really coming with the stats this week, Shanks. You like it?
He's obviously got a lot of work on this week. He's got to get the content up.
Yeah.
And Ireland against Italy.
You know me well.
Ireland against Italy is the last match of this round 3. That's on Sports Extra, 3 o'clock. I think we know who wins that one. That again is, open to debate, isn't it? It will rumble on. Thank you very much, chaps. Matt Dawson, Tom Shanklin, John Barkley, and Shane Horgan. We will see you in a fortnight's time because there's a fallow week after. Thanks, chaps.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Sonia.
No
Good luck,
problem.
everybody.
So don't forget, more Six Nations commentary this weekend. First up on Saturday, it's Scotland against France, as I said, the build-up from 2, then on 5 Live, England-Wales at 4:45, and Sunday, Ireland take on Italy. That gets underway at 3 on Sports Extra. Up next, Steve Crossman will be here with the EuroLeague's team, looking at how the Russia-Ukraine conflict will affect football across Europe and what that might mean for the Champions League final. But now, on 5 Live, it's the news with Aaron Paul.
Listen on BBC Sounds. This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
The US President Joe Biden has set out a range of sanctions against Russia in response to its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in the early hours of this morning. He said the measures would cut off the country's banks and limit its ability to do business in dollars. Mr. Biden also listed a number of wealthy Russian elites who would face restrictions, saying they should share in the pain because they personally gained from the Kremlin's policies. Rose Gottemweiler is a former NATO Deputy Secretary General.
What's become clear in the last 48 hours is the degree to which Putin has been operating inside this small bubble. So I'm not sure that he's capable of having priced in the damage to the Russian economy. He's not one who in the past has really cared that much about the Russian economy. Actually, I am certain that he has not thought through all of the implications for the Russian economy.
Earlier, Boris Johnson outlined similar sanctions, which he said would constrain Russia's military, industrial and technological capabilities for years to come. More than 100 people and businesses and all major Russian banks will have their assets frozen, and the airline Aeroflot will be banned from landing in the UK. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says a new Iron Curtain is falling and closing Russia off from the civilized world. Russian forces have captured the disused Chernobyl nuclear power plant and an airbase on the outskirts of the Ukrainian capital Kiev. Hundreds of explosions have been reported in the port city of Mariupol, where fighting is taking place. Finally, in other news, a man has been arrested over the murder of a woman whose body was found in Woodland in South Lanarkshire nearly 17 years ago. Ian Packer, who is 49, is being questioned by detectives in connection with Emma Caldwell's death in 2005.
All this month, the Radio 2 Piano is at Maida Vale.
Radio 2's Piano Room Month.
Joined by 20 of our best loved artists.
Hey, it's Anne-Marie.
David Gray. This is Jack Bandit.
Emily Sander here.
This is Ed Sheeran.
It's Jamie Conn.
All bringing us special live performances accompanied by the BBC Concert Orchestra. BBC Radio 2's Piano Room Month continues throughout February. Listen on BBC Sounds and watch on iPlayer. This is 5 Live Sport.
Good evening, welcome back to 5 Live Sport. I'm Steve Crossman and this is the EuroLeagues with you for the next hour. From 10 o'clock, Steve Bunce will be joined by former super middleweight world champion Richie Woodall to look ahead to a busy weekend of boxing. They'll hear from Josh Taylor, who defends his 4 belts on Saturday night, and also from Lawrence Okoli, who makes the second defence of his cruiserweight title on Sunday evening. There is live football going on as we speak right now in Europe and in the Premier League. Let's start with Arsenal against Wolves. Sahel Sahi.
Arsenal 0, Wolves 1. Still Steve, we play 65 minutes of the game. Wolves with the early goal after 10 minutes through Hwang. Arsenal are pouring forward in such of an equaliser, but Wolves have had the best chance in the second half. Podence picked out Hwang right side of the area. It's a good save by Aaron Ramsdale. Arsenal 0, Wolves 1.
There's an absolutely frantic Europa League game going on at Ibrox. It's the second leg in what is effectively the round of 32 between Rangers and Borussia Dortmund. Roddy Forsyth.
Rangers 1, Borussia 2 on the night. Rangers 5, Borussia 4 on aggregate. And Rangers took the lead through Tavernier from a penalty kick just as he scores in the first leg. And again, in a repeat of the first leg, English teenager Jude Bellingham got the equaliser for Borussia before. And then shortly before half-time, Daniel Marlon got the break of the ball inside the Rangers area. There's a pinball machine, and he stuck out a leg to divert it past McGregor. I'm sure that this second half would be very tense. Indeed, 5-4 on aggregate to Rangers inside the second half.
Thank you, Roddy. We'll bring you updates throughout the show. Already tonight in the UEFA Conference League, Leicester beat Randers 3-1 to go through 7-2 on aggregate, and Celtic lost 2-0 to Bodo Glimt and go out 5-1. You can get involved over the course of the show by texting us on 85058 on social media. It's at 5 Live Sport. So on the EuroLeagues, we will discuss Joao Felix asks whether his goal against Manchester United could prove to be a coming-of-age moment. We'll also talk about the passionate comments from Antonio Conte on his Tottenham future, or perhaps lack thereof. Should we take it all with a pinch of salt? But we're going to spend at least the first half hour discussing a far more serious and important topic. What can and will European football do now that Vladimir Putin has launched a full-scale military attack on Ukraine? With us, as always, we have Guillaume Balaguer. Hi, Guillaume.
Good evening, Steve.
Good evening. We also have with us Christophe Touré, Belgian football journalist. Hi, Christophe.
Good evening, guys.
And Miguel Delaney is on the programme as well, the chief football writer for The Independent. Hi, Miguel.
Hi, guys.
Hi, so we've got a lot of ground to cover, and we're going to talk about international football, we're going to talk about club football in the Champions League, but we also are going to have a very personal story as well, Guillaume, because a good friend of yours and a former guest on the EuroLeagues, is in a really difficult situation in Ukraine right now.
Yes, Luis Cortés, his treble-winning 2020-21 season with the women's side of Football Club Barcelona is considered one of the greatest seasons in women's club history because, yeah, he won everything. Since November, he became the Ukraine national coach, and he was in Kiev this morning, and right now he's on his way to Lviv, which is about 540 kilometers away. As they heard 3 bombs going off about 8 o'clock this morning, not too far from where they lived in Kiev, decided to leave from that moment, and he has started posting on Twitter his journey away from Kiev, and to be honest, despite all the time he's been driving away, and we'll hear tales of that, they haven't gone very, very far.
Well, hopefully we're going to speak to Luis on the EuroLeagues tonight. Of course, we've said to him that we really, we only want to hear from him if he's in a safe position to do so, and happy to do so. And Luis was lined up to speak to us right now, actually, but we think his line has just dropped out. So as soon as we can speak to him, we will. But Christoph, I know that that this is a situation lots of people are in right now at the moment. Of course, what's happening in Ukraine is absolutely horrific and devastating for Ukrainians, and there's also a lot of people from other nationalities right now trying to leave the country.
Well, I guess a lot of people have already seen this video with the 30 Brazilian footballers who are playing for different Ukrainian clubs that are stuck in a hotel and they're asking for help. So it's you see them there in the video all together with their wives, with their children. So it might be a very hard situation for them. Like you feel somewhere they're not even at home, but then something like that happens. So you don't want to be in their shoes at the moment. You don't want to be there. Definitely, if it's your home as a Ukrainian people, but also if you're working there.
Well, I think now we are able to speak to Luis Cortés. Luis, can you hear us?
Yes, yes.
Luis, how are you and where are you?
Look, I'm now in the highway, Kiev and Lviv. 110 in 10 hours. We were in this car in a van, but I love the Ukrainian Association give us with a driver also, and we are in this highway driving to Lviv.
Luis, you've been posting on Twitter, so those who know you have been keeping a close eye on you. There was an earlier photo with your sister Joris, who I guess is with you in the van. You've been describing there's been chaos, as there is a lot of traffic, and it's only about 5-6 hours ago that you got into the MO6, which is the motorway that's taking you away from Kiev to Lviv. But I hear that you actually have decided to drive on the other side of the road against the flow of traffic. You still there?
No, but it's true. It was like 30 lanes in each side, yes, but all the lanes were just in the same side going to Lviv in this direction, because there were a lot of traffic, as you said, and we need to be now the traffic is a little bit better. We are going a bit faster, but there's a lot of cars, of course, and we go step by step, yes.
And about 4 hours ago, when it was getting darker, your driver decided to leave you. You swapped drivers because he wanted to walk back to Kiev to join his family and get them to leave Kiev as well. So how was that?
It was amazing. There were amazing people in the world. We were driving to Lviv. We didn't know because they speak Ukrainian and we didn't know about it. And one moment the driver stopped the van and he said, "Okay, bye, he's a new driver." She was another guy who came by bicycle from close to Kiev, and say, "Okay, this is the new driver. I have to go home again from my family and from my people." I say, "Oh, how you go?" I say, by walking, because I need to go there. So it's amazing that this people driver in such a situation, he decided to be professional, to be with us these 3, 4, 5 hours. I don't know how much time he spent with us. And then he went again to look to take care for his family.
Luis, it must be a very frightening situation to be in, and I imagine you're surrounded by so many people who are trying to do exactly what you're trying to do to leave the country.
Yeah, it's a really difficult situation. We don't think we live in fear, but it's clear that you don't know what will happen. We don't know when we will arrive to Lviv. We don't know if we will be able to cross the border, and we don't know when. So that's a very difficult situation. It's not our fear because we are not fire or nothing like this, but it's true that it's a very strange situation because we have never lived across it before, and we are away from home and we don't know what will happen. But I hope everything is going well. I am posting on Twitter about our situation every 2-3 hours just to give more information. But it's true that it's always the same. There's a highway, we are going forward step by step with a lot of cars and waiting to get in
you're stuck in the motorway, you get to talk to the people in the other cars, you get to share their emotions, or you just try to protect yourself and be in the van for now?
Yes, no, nothing is new. Well, we didn't speak with other people, but it's true that when we were going out from Kiev, we saw a lot of people next to the road with some luggage and trying to go far from Kiev, but without any car. And it's that we are also now in touch with some of our players and some members of staff. For example, speaking now with the assistant coach, is one Ukrainian girl who is my assistant coach also as Ukrainian, and she said me that she'll spend this night in the underground. So she decided this, trying to be in the underground. She says that it's a safety place, and tomorrow morning they will try to move from Kiev to Lviv, because she wants to stay in Kiev this night because she's waiting for her mother coming from Kiev. So it's not a new situation for me, but it's really more difficult situation for a lot of Ukrainian people.
Luis, thank you so much for talking to us. Please, obviously, stay as safe as you can and keep us updated with how you're getting on. Thank you for coming on the programme.
Thank you very much.
That's Luis Cortez, who's the head coach of the Ukrainian women's national football team. Okay, we've got a lot of ground to cover on Euroleagues. Before we get into what's happening with UEFA and their extraordinary meeting tomorrow regarding the location for this year's Champions League final, let's hear about another goal in the Europa League. It's a big one, and it's come at Ibrox, Roddy.
Yes, indeed. There are 10 goals in this extraordinary time now, and it was Rangers who got the last one, drawing 2 each on the night. It was good, persistent play by Bassi on the left. He got across into the box, and eluded Morelos, but fell for Tavernier, and the Rangers captain struck it on the half volley at the back post. So on the night, Rangers 2, Borussia Dortmund 2. Overall, Rangers 6, Borussia Dortmund 4. I'm going to lose track of this shortly.
And while we are checking in on the live football, let's take it to Arsenal Wolves in the Premier League as well. So, Hell Sardi.
Yeah, 30 minutes to play here, Steve. Still Arsenal 0, Wolves 1, but Arsenal had a good chance just a couple of minutes ago. Saka found Lacazette at the near post, and it was a good save by Jose Sarr, tumbling down towards the left-hand side. Arsenal 0, Wolves 1.
So, Hell, thank you. This is the Euroleague on 5 Sport. Christoph Turicki and Balogun, Miguel Delaney, all with us on the programme. UEFA has said this today. UEFA shares the international community's significant concern for the security situation developing in Europe and strongly condemns the ongoing Russian military invasion in Ukraine. Miguel, as we know, the Champions League final is due to take place in St Petersburg on May the 28th, but there is this extraordinary meeting at the UEFA Exco tomorrow, at which we understand they'll be stripped of that final, yes?
Yeah, it would be a huge surprise. It wasn't especially certain. Even earlier this week before the invasion, the suggestions were they're going to move it. And maybe a little curiously, it's expected we won't get a new venue until later in the season, especially after the semi-finals. I think I suppose want to ensure no club in the final has advantage of keep in mind things like travel. But of course, before that situation was going to pose logistical problems for UEFA, as much as obvious political and moral problems, which do point the headaches to come. But say, in the case of St. Peter's, we could have had a real situation where countries wouldn't have allowed their club teams or individuals to travel to Russia. And that's separate to the Champions League final. I think that's going to be a recurring issue over the rest of this season. I mean, what happens to say, and even the next season, if this crisis continues, obviously hope it doesn't, what happens to, say, Russian clubs in European football? Are they all going to have to move into neutral venues? Obviously, on the other side, of course, and Ukraine clearly has far greater concerns. Well, Chester reported today about how football stopped for 30 days. They will eventually try to play themselves, and more than anything, I suppose, to try to keep life going to some degree. But what happens there? So there's a whole range of complications for UEFA to deal with. And of course, I mean, some of them are not just as simple as picking a venue for a match. There's also issues like Gazprom being such a key UEFA sponsor. And I mean, I'm doing a piece on this tomorrow. And if, so just from talking to people today, and one of the things that has even been approached is if Russia is to become a pariah state and be politically isolated in the way we expect, does a moral argument rise that FIFA and UEFA almost need to treat Russia like, say, apartheid South Africa was so many years, or even in 1992, say, when Yugoslavia was excluded from the European Championships because of the Milosevic regime's bombardment of Sarajevo. Now, I think in these cases, I suppose sporting federations, to a certain degree, they try to have a cake and eat it, and they try and always kind of spin this almost unsustainable line that supposedly separates politics and sport. And we know they're completely intertwined. What generally happens is they try and keep it political, as we saw in the summer when there was sort of tension between, say, Russia over the Ukraine kit, Euro 2020. Also, when there was a little bit of tension between Hungary and the use of LGBT colours on the Munich stadium. Then, federations like UEFA try to insist they're apolitical, and they just wait for sanctions from higher bodies or from governments. And that probably wasn't going to happen here. It will always give their out. But then what I think what we expect is, and the way governments are moving, is that sanctions are going to be quite severe with the room for escalation. And that happens, then football is going to be an increasingly difficult spot. And it's possible some of the federations and the game itself could be out of step.
I mean, some political situations, DM, are so severe and so serious that there is no way that sport can stand aside and just watch, is they?
Yeah, I disagree with Miguel. It's not a difficult situation. It's an easy situation. I know that you're trying to say exactly the same. The morality of this one is so clear. We know that everything in Russia, most of the financial structure is controlled by the government. We know that profits of huge companies like Gazprom go to government and just a small group of people. And for the nation, those oligarchs that the UK, for instance, have decided to go against a war and declared back with that money and that people, and you never know that. What else is to investigate? What else is to study? And as Miguel is pointing out, of course, we've seen just the first phase of sanctions, and I'm sure there's plans for much bigger than that. At what point UEFA is going to say this affects us, and this is something that we have to intervene? I think the consequences of what's happened should already be reflected. Well, I know some clubs have already working on it, but more should be heard and done.
Well, we've also got a classic example of what we're talking about today, whereas for the Expo tomorrow, one of the members of the executive committee, Alexander Zhukov, he's not there because he was at Putin's meeting today because he's considered one of Russia's most talented corporate executives, likely the next chief executive of Gazprom. And I mean, again, that points to exactly what Guillaume is saying about how intertwined the state is, and also how difficult it is for football to untangle its relationship with the Russian state, which I suspect is one reason why the GAY is very much holding, or at least the parties are holding a wait-and-see approach. I mean, even FIFA put up a statement today about monitoring the situation, which is the weakest language you can imagine. I've just seen on Twitter now, Rob Harris posted a video where I think it was himself, Infantino was questioned about whether he'll discard the Order of Merit medal he was given by Putin in 2018. And when you have this sort of, what should really be superficial and meaningless posturing, but again, it shows kind of the delicate politics around this. And like someone in government put me today, basically, a lot of sports diplomacy, there's a thinking they're able to navigate things that use power of sport, but actually it tends to be quite cack-handed, and sporting federations are often unprepared for the reality of situations as rugby team today.
And yet, the Basketball European Federation has already cancelled the 3 games that had to take place this week in Russia, one of them involving Barcelona. Barcelona, who at first, at the end of the day, said that we don't want to travel. Then they changed the tune, possibly because they felt forced by the authorities, but when they realized that both the authorities finally and Barcelona had the same idea, which was it would make no sense to go to Russia, then not just this one, but 2 other games have been cancelled. So it's possible to react. I'm sure there are protocols in which federations can actually take a decision, and it's time for UEFA to act as soon as possible, I'd say.
Christoph, Gal mentioned the Gazprom situation, that Schalke today released a statement to say that they're going to remove the logo of Gazprom from their shirts and replace it just by the letters and number Schalke 04. Gazprom is a majority state-owned Russian corporation. It's also a major UEFA sponsor. So could you see UEFA coming under a lot more pressure when it comes to that relationship?
They definitely will, but it's the thing with sport federations, they always like to choose side where they get the money from. That's basically it. We get the money, and when they find they're already suspicious where the money's coming from, and they are in a situation now that there's lots of pressure on them. So I don't know what they're going to do, if they're going to drop their main sponsor of the Champions League, but I guess that will be one of the consequences. I guess I think there will be loads of pressure if next week, we do it in Champions League again, and you get the first thing you get, we put it on your TV, you get a Gazprom advert. Yeah, it's pretty insulting when it comes on now, I think, when you know the deals between Gazprom and Russia. So they're a pretty difficult situation in that case, because they get a lot of money from them too.
I mean, just on that, what Christoph was saying, I was at the Atletico game last night, and I was just thinking about this day, just the absurdity of the situation where a mere hours before invasion, I was sitting in the stadium, and they played that Gazprom ad, which uses that famous Tchaikovsky theme. And already myself and Gareth probably raising the right at that when we saw them on. But then, of course, I was just working late, kind of finishing my work on the game, and especially watching the start of the invasion live, as kind of as awful as that sounds, it was a reality situation. And I think this whole story, well, obviously, football is, it's almost inconsequential next to the real world consequence of this. But this crisis, as regards to affecting football, what it should do is really expose the huge questions for the game about who it takes its money from. Because that's almost, basically, the modern history of European football is almost a complete lack of regulation or restriction. Who can take over clubs? Who goes into deal clubs? You can see it now with the current, what was almost a gold rush for, say, these deals with cryptocurrency. There's absolutely no questions about how it's used. Everyone just kind of rushes into it. And then now we have circumstances like this crisis in Russia, which suddenly shows this has limits, shows there can be consequences if you don't really do proper due process on exactly the sort of relationships that the sport is getting into.
Let me go back after we've been talking about politics and what's behind the decision or pressure that UEFA suffer on the personal side of things. So already Christoph has mentioned that video of Dinamo Kiev and Shakhtar Donetsk players, Brazilian players, and their wives and kids asking to be moved away because of course there's no commercial flights anymore, and they know what to do. And as you saw, there's a big bunch of Brazilians there. That reminded me that I went to Kiev maybe about a month and a half ago to see what Shakhtar Donetsk, who had to leave Donetsk, of course, because of the Ukraine-Russian war in 2014. they've been away since then. They had the offices in a hotel owned by the president of Shakhtar in Kiev. They made the rooms into offices, and they already have been suffering. They're moving from their own homes. A stadium that was actually fantastic is becoming derelict. And I remember talking to Dario Sarna, a legend of European football, who's the director of football there, and he said, literally, I thought I was going to be away for 4 days, so my clothes are still hanging in the wardrobes, and I had to get some stuff in a couple of bags when away, and I haven't been able to see my mother, who isn't domestic then, but obviously what we're going to be seeing and hearing now are stories similar to that, and it is the Shakhtar and Dinamo Kiev players that were involved in that video. We're asking for help, and I just don't know how you can help them. As we heard from you, it's very difficult to get away from Ukraine right now.
Yeah. Well, within Ukraine, Miguel, the Ukrainian FA, they'll appeal to FIFA and UEFA to prevent any Russian national or club teams participating in any international competitions under the auspices of FIFA and UEFA. So we'll just focus on the club side of it now. We'll come on to the international situation shortly. But I mean, we're in a situation where literally we're on air live right now, and Zenit St. Petersburg are playing in the Europa League. That is going to be another very interesting discussion that will be happening within UEFA as to what they do with Russian clubs, that specific Russian club, in European competition right now. It might not be it by the end of the night anyway, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, the expectation, or at least the minimum expectation, is that they'll be forced to play their main games in Europe to get through on a neutral venue. It's just a bit of a tangent, man. I think it kind of sums up, again, the absurdity we're talking about. If this Champions League final had actually gone ahead in St. Petersburg without this crisis, we actually would have had a situation where, and again, it took so systems together, we would have a situation where the final would have been played in St. Petersburg Stadium, which is known as the Gazprom Arena. Gazprom, of course, being UEFA's main sponsor. And yet, for that match, because of these bizarre kind of American rules about sponsorship, the stadium wouldn't have actually been known as the Gazprom Arena on UEFA's official list. No, someone's guess. I mean, what we expect to happen then is that Zenit do get through. They won't be playing at that stadium themselves. They'll be forced into venues. But of course, this is going to be one of the most controversial and most noteworthy next steps, which is the potential of complaints over actually having faced Russia. And actually, I was talking to some people involved in a sports federation by today, and they were pointing out how the one team is there to punish Russian people at Russian clubs who, this is all it's there in much smaller way than anyone in Ukraine. They're almost victims of this situation themselves. You can see it in some protests in Moscow tonight. And there's a feeling of the unfair punishment of these clubs. But again, as we were saying earlier, it could well come down to whether international bodies or governments actually enforce sanctions on Russia as a whole, as we've seen with other states in the past.
The LBTs are helping UEFA ahead right now. It's still 0-0, so Hungary gets they are through. So that would be the easy solution for UEFA if Betis knocks it out like it is now at the moment.
Yeah, it's Betis 0, Zenit 0 with 12 minutes to go. Let's know what's happening at Ibrox whilst we're talking about the scores, Roddy.
Well, indeed, the Rangers, we thought had gone 7-4 ahead, believe it or not, on aggregate after Reyes robbed one of his opponents and squared the ball to Ryan Kent.